The San Francisco Bay Area is an ever-growing metropolis. To the north, we have Napa and Sonoma, and the home of fine wine. To the south, Silicon Valley and the world's high-tech industry. From the Pacific in the west to Mount Diablo in the east, this piece of beautiful and blessed land attracts tourists from all over the globe. San Francisco and the Bay Area is one of the world's top tourist destinations. We have great wine, diverse and eclectic food, a rich artistic culture, and trailblazing technology like no other place on earth. These 11 Bay Area counties contain 7 million people, and 1 million of these people are Chinese or have Chinese heritage. Today, the Chinese people in the Bay Area have become a major force in terms of culture, economy, and technology. They are part of the development of the Bay Area and part of what is driving the Bay Area towards success, helping the Bay Area grow and shine like a star for the entire world. I'm Yalek Wang, reporter and anchor from KTSF TV. In the next half hour, we'll take a journey back in time to examine the lives of early Chinese immigrants of the Bay Area, this place, this home that we're part of, and the influence we continue to achieve. The following 4 episodes are a collaboration between KTSF and the Chinese hospital. We'll examine many topics, but we'll focus mainly on health and on important issues regarding health care. In the following episodes, the Chinese hospital will provide insight and resources to help educate everyone on its past, present, and future. We're here to examine a legacy that belongs not just to the Chinese hospital, but to everyone of Chinese heritage in the Bay Area. This program is a co-production between KTSF TV and the Chinese hospital. Historians are in agreement that Chinese history in the Bay Area can be traced back to as early as the 19th century. We all know that during the gold rush, Chinese workers came to the United States to help build the railroads. But I want to take us even further back to a time almost 600 years prior. Is it possible that our Chinese Bay Area ancestors can be traced this far back? Some believe it is indeed possible, and there's reliable evidence to support this theory. Legend has it that as far back as 1421, the Chinese had already made their way to the Americas. It is said that Chinese explorers sailed across the ocean to map out far and distant lands, and eventually landed at what is now San Francisco. Some believe that the Chinese fleets were more advanced than the European fleets of the same time. Many question this theory, but some still believe it to be true. The story goes that during the Ming Dynasty, Sanbo eunuchs were dispatched to the western seas. During this time, Zhang Hu was said to have led a great naval fleet and arrived at what is today the American West Coast. 71 years before Columbus discovered the new continent, the Chinese may have already landed in the West. The flagship of Zhang Hu's fleet, a leviathan of its time, is said to have entered the San Francisco Bay through the strait that now anchors the Golden Gate Bridge, then sailed up the Sacramento River. If this legend is true, it would mean that Zhang Hu's arrival to the Bay Area predates the birth of Columbus. But in contrast to the Columbus expedition, Zhang Hu's exploration of America was not long. They stayed only a short while, and while they may have surveyed the region and observed its geography, they quickly returned to Asia, leaving no trace. More than a century was to pass before the Chinese once again stepped onto this great continent, finally to stay, to become part of the Bay Area that we enjoy today.
How many thousands died we didn't even know, and we didn't care at the time. Nobody took care of them, and certainly not the white public.
But we do know for sure that Chinese immigrants 100 and some years ago crossed the Pacific to Angel Island and finally stepped onto this place called the Golden Mountain. But unfortunately, they weren't able to escape the shade of prejudice that followed.
Isolated, we were actually discriminated against.
You have to go back to the 1800s, and where the community as a whole, in the 1800s, there was a lot of discrimination against the Chinese in this community, Chinatown. And in fact, it was very difficult for the Chinese to get access to modern Western medicine. They were citizens of the U.S. and also in San Francisco, but they were discriminated against. They couldn't get seen at the hospitals.
We were denied health care, in the 1800s, that we had to create our own healthcare system. It's sad to see that this occurs, but it does, that people get discriminated against. But, we're fortunate that the Chinese community pulled together to create their own hospital to be able to care for their own community.
In the middle of the 19th century, along the coastal region of Canton, the reign of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom had left the people destitute and in despair. Many men were forced to leave their homes and families to travel across the great Pacific Ocean to the Golden Mountains, seeking either gold or any means of livelihood they could find. The first Western doctor in Chinatown was William Spear. Spear was a priest of the Elder Church of Christ. The first church in Chinatown was started by him. William Spear practiced medicine in Canton. He traveled to San Francisco in 1852 and opened the first clinic in Chinatown. He treated many Chinese patients who had literally just gotten off the boat. The clinic can be called the forerunner of today's Chinese hospital. In 1854, he tried to set up the first hospital in Chinatown. The white people said, "You Chinese folks are dirty. You guys carry over diseases." Using this excuse, they ostracized the Chinese immigrants. First, they called the Chinese immigrants faithless. Second, they said the Chinese immigrants did not have proper sanitation procedures. Third, they said Chinese carried mysterious bacterias. Therefore, whenever there was any spreading ailment, they always said it came from Chinatown. If it was a vermin, plague, or leprosy, it must have come from the Chinese. At that time, most of the Chinese population did not understand, or for that matter, trust Western medicine. Chinatown had Chinese medicine clinics with doctors who practiced Dai Da. If one were to become sick, they would be sent home with a package of ingredients to make a healing broth. Only when their conditions reached a critical state did the Chinese seek the help of Western doctors.
Our patients were not accepted elsewhere. There were a number of other hospitals in town, but many more than there are now, but they would not admit the Chinese patients. And once in a while, they would let one go into San Francisco General Hospital, which was too far away for the families to visit. And so it became very impractical, so we needed a place where our own people could be taken care of.
Chinese did not, some anyway, or many Chinese, was not inclined to visit, Western traditional medicine, even if they were sick. Okay, but there were some who were indigent and had to go to hospital and so on. But even when they wanted to go to it, they were not accepted. So even the city and county hospital rejected any Chinese who had wanted to attend. So they had to take care of themselves.
San Francisco had many hospitals, and they had many sick beds. It was really sad when we tried to open our own hospital, though. They would not allow us to open a hospital of our own. At the same time, they did not allow us to visit their hospitals for treatment. We weren't allowed in government-operated hospitals either. They said we are dirty and carry infectious diseases, therefore barring us from seeking medical treatment. It was under those sad circumstances that the public hall in Chinatown provided the dying immigrants a place to pass away, helping them through their last moments of life.
Prior to the establishment of a hospital in Chinatown, they depended on, let's say, if you were incurable and you were on your deathbed, the different Uyghur had what they would call the Taiping Fong. And the Taiping Fong in translation is the chambers of tranquility. But in reality, that's where you were left until you expire.
If a Chinese person were to die here, they would wish to be returned to their roots. But how? They must be shipped home. Ultimately, that responsibility fell to the shoulders of Tung Wah Hospital. They accepted all the dead Chinese and transported them back to Hong Kong. You can imagine during the 1800s how horrid the conditions of medical services must have been. Finally, in 1894, the outcry for a hospital in Chinatown became too loud to stop. The need became imperative. With the help of 3 missionaries, the Qing Dynasty Imperial Court, and Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, the Tung Wah dispensary finally opened. It was 1900. Located at 828 Sacramento Street, the Tung Wah dispensary was to eventually become Tung Wah Hospital.
And so the Chinese dispensary, the Tung Wah dispensary, was formed on Sacramento Street so that they could get access to not just their, traditional Chinese medicine, but also Western medicine. So that was the Tung Wah dispensary, 1899.
It was around 1900. The Chinese were trying hard to gather money. The Chinese government provided a bit. The Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association provided some more. With that, they opened a hospital on Sacramento Street. That's how it started. Around 1900, the Chinese were trying hard to gather money together. The Chinese government provided a bit. The Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association provided some more. With that, they opened a hospital on Sacramento Street. That's how it started. Our forefathers, with each dollar and each cent, slowly saved to start everything up. Honestly, though, back in 1899, without the help of foreign doctors and a foreign priest, we would not have been able to start the hospital. In addition, the Qing Imperial Court Ambassador Ho Yao, I do not recall his Chinese name, but without his help, we would not have been able to start the hospital up. In the beginning, Tung Wah Dispensary was very small. They operated primarily as a charity organization. Basically, they did not collect any money in the beginning. It was completely free, but there were problems. There were 2 methods of collecting fees. They had Chinese Western doctors who practiced Western medicine and Western doctors, but the Western doctors charged twice as much. They really didn't have enough money. In the end, they realized they must collect some more money just to survive. According to Chengler Shen, the fundraising director of Tung Wah Hospital, in the Tung Wah Hospital Letter of Credit preface, he wrote, "Tung Wah Dispensary benefits from suffering of our brethren's sickness, for we are limited by economics. Therefore, we cannot spread our benevolence."
Well, actually, the dispensary, medicine wasn't very advanced in those days. And a lot of the people that were brought to the dispensary to spend their last days were people with terminal illnesses. There was a lot of tuberculosis, and people did not want to infect the other members of the family. So when it became clear that they couldn't take care of them anymore, they would bring them to the dispensary and they would stay there.
Colin Kwok, a retired Tung Wah Hospital doctor in the Tung Wah Hospital Medical Staff Archive, described the condition of the dispensary at the time. Despite the fact that it is a clinic, it functions like a Taiping hall, a rest hall, a hall of tranquility. Although the clinic's use was limited, it created the basis for the Tung Wah Hospital. Do you remember when Tung Wah Hospital opened its doors? The answer when we return. Just before the break, we asked you when Tung Wah Hospital opened its doors. The year was 1900.
That all burned down in the 2006 earthquake. And so they rebuilt that. Actually, I think they rebuilt it on Trenton Alley in Chinatown. And so at that time, from the 1906 onward, really the population did continue to grow. So there was a greater need for care.
After the clinic burned down, we needed a full-scale hospital. But no matter what, it became an issue of funding. We did not have the land or the funds.
They asked the city supervisors and the city fathers, the leadership, for permission to build a modern hospital, but they were refused. And there was a lot of attitude after the earthquake was over that the entire Chinese community should be moved down the peninsula.
Tung Wah Dispensary and most of the buildings in Chinatown were demolished by the 1906 earthquake. But it did not destroy the determination of the Chinese population to rebuild their own hospital. But how to do it? Slowly, slowly, slowly. Bits and pieces of hard-earned money were slowly saved up until 1920, when finally a hope for the hospital rebuild came along. An individual with the surname Yu from Toisang had a piece of land, and he was willing to sell it, dirt cheap. For a few $1,000s, we got the land. So now at least we had an address to build the hospital on. At that time, 15 organizations in Chinatown united together to begin rebuilding and expanding the clinic into a real hospital. These organizations included Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, Ning Young, Su Hing, Hop Wo, Kong Chao, Yong Wo, Sam Yup, Yan Wo, Chinese Chamber of Commerce, Tu Wan, Chinese American Citizens Alliance, Chinese Christian Union of San Francisco, Chinatown YMCA, Kuomintang of China in USA, Chi Kong Tong, and Chinese Constitutionalist Party.
Chinese Hospital was founded by the community. It is a community hospital, and the 15 most active community organizations in the 1920s formed the first board with representatives from each of those organizations.
Tu Wan, Chinese American Citizens Alliance, is an organization created to fight for equal rights of Chinese. It is also an organization created for the service of the community. Back in 1899, when Tung Wah Dispensary was created, we were one of the 15 organizations that worked together. Everyone cooperated, everyone contributed, and we created Tung Wah Hospital in service of all the Chinese people. To collect enough funds, the board reached across the sea. Colin Kwok's father was one of the original board members.
I remember him telling me about his experiences obtaining funds from Hong Kong and from London. And when they had enough money, they put the hospital together.
At that time, they spent $10,000 to purchase land on Jackson Street, and they named the new hospital Tung Wah Hospital. Why did they call it Tung Wah Hospital? The name Tung Wah Hospital originated from the Chinese hospital in Hong Kong. If you were to go to Hong Kong now, there are Tung Wah hospitals everywhere. Tung Wah Hospital started back in the 19th century under the ruling of the British. Back then, Westerners practiced Western medicine and Chinese practiced Eastern medicine. Finally, when there were enough Chinese practicing Western medicine, they realized they need Chinese doctors because they would best understand Chinese culture and customs. At that time, Jackson Street was still located at the outskirts of Chinatown. During the permit registration process, the Chinese coalition received opposition from non-Chinese residents. They claimed the hospital was not within the territory of Chinatown. They were worried that the Chinese patients would spread diseases in their neighborhood and concerned about the value of their property going down due to the influx of the Chinese population.
But like everything else in that time of a very anti-Chinese climate, the neighborhood objected and refused to issue them a permit.
Once the location of the land was mentioned, the Westerners voiced their objection once again. They said, "This place is not in Chinatown. Even though it's on Jackson Street, it wasn't within Chinatown." It wasn't until 1925 that the hospital finally opened. It was extremely difficult.
It was clear that we were going to have a hospital. And so the powers that be finally relented and said, okay, you can build your hospital.
Ultimately, the San Francisco City Council allowed the construction of the hospital. In November 1923, the California state government issued a registration permit to Tung Wah Hospital. The 5-story Tung Wah Hospital building was finally erected in San Francisco. It was a red building with the elegant classic style of Chinese architecture. When 1925 came about, donations for the hospital reached $200,000. So they all decided on April 18th of that year to hold the opening ceremony. So in 1925, Tung Wah Hospital finally opened. But then came the next stage of its constant struggle. Tung Wah Hospital started with the help of community organizations. Do you remember how many? The answer after we return. Tung Wah Hospital has 16 organizations comprising its board. It started with 15, and then they added the Doctors Coalition.
The Chinese hospital was extremely important to the community because the Chinese first generation predominantly spoke no English. So, I mean, and also Chinatown was pretty much isolated at my time growing up. There's an invisible boundary that separated Chinatown from mainstream.
The Chinese in the Bay Area faced multitudes of discrimination and were also in dire need of medical accessibility. On top of everything else was the language barrier and differences in traditions and customs, along with economics limitations. The opening of Tung Wah Hospital was to the citizens of Chinatown like rain to a drought. But to follow their motto as both a health and a charity organization was difficult. To serve the poor and underprivileged, of the 50 sick beds of the hospital, 20 of them were reserved for patients with reduced or no fees. Despite having only a meager income, Tung Wah Hospital faced enormous expenditures. It became difficult just to stay afloat. In 1925, from the moment of our establishment, we were always running below budget. It's clearly written, Yi Ye Yang Yong, maintain the hospital by the practice of medicine. The board runs the hospital with that as our motto. We will always try to charge you the least amount possible. We also allot funds for charity. And we run on the principle of you pay for what you can afford. At that time, It was $10 to $25. It was still quite a bit of money back in 1925. The biggest problem with Tung Wah Hospital is that it relied on donations from the community. You see, there is always fundraising around the Lunar New Year. There are many ways to donate. Some donated real estate that the hospital could then rent out. The hospital knows that most of Chinatown is poor, so 20 of the sick beds were reserved for the poor. They were free. There was no charge for these medical services.
Is that there was a period of time where in San Francisco, Chinese could not buy property, but nonprofits could. So all these associations bought a lot of property. And to this day and age, a lot of the buildings in Chinatown are still owned by these associations that are over 100 years old. So that's where they formed an association to build the hospital. And I'm sure whenever the hospital had a shortfall, the community raised money to fund the care.
With a shortage of funding, the board of the hospital still had to find ways to make more money. So they turned to renting out real estate they received from donations to support the charitable hospital. But everyone's efforts still could not stop the greater current of events. In 1930, the Great Depression swept in, and the fate of Tung Wah Hospital was once again in jeopardy.